Woomera Range, South Australia, Launch Complex LA-8. It's the 29th of November 1967. It's 2:18 PM in the afternoon. A PGM-11 Redstone Sparta rocket, serial number 2029/SV-10, enters the final moments before countdown. This launch had to be a success, as many important people had come from far and wide to witness this historic occasion. Equally, they didn't want to see a repeat of yesterday's failure to launch. The launch was aborted 30 seconds before ignition due to an air conditioning unit failure to detach from the fuselage. That has been fixed, apparently, so now today, all is go for launch. The rocket itself, however, was not where the interest was. The interest was with the small 45 kilogram black cone perched above this 22 metre tube. That 1.56 by 0.76 metre cone-shaped object was the culmination of 11 months of frantic work by the Australian Government Weapons Research Establishment and the Adelaide University Physics Department. Together, they designed, manufactured and quality tested an artificial satellite that, if launched successfully, would be Australia's official entry into the space age. It would make us only the third country to design and send into orbit a satellite from within our own borders. It would be an Australian first, Australia's first satellite, and we called it WRESAT. What was WRESAT? The Weapons Research Establishment Satellite, or WRESAT, was a one-off experimental satellite of Australian design. The Sparta trial was using the Redstone rockets and was scheduled for 10 trials. They ended up only using 9 rockets, so they had a rocket to spare. And, well, watching from the sidelines were all the Australian scientists and boffins, and thought, we could probably use that rocket. We've got a bit of an idea. Artificial satellite technology was still emerging. Since Sputnik in 1957, only a few countries had launched satellites into low Earth orbit. In Australia, for quite a few years, the Weapons Research Establishment and the Adelaide University, the closest they'd ever got to space was the involvement with the sounding rockets that were launched periodically from Woomera to test the upper atmosphere of the Earth. You know, if they could get a satellite into low Earth orbit from Woomera, that would be a really good thing. All they needed was a rocket. Lo and behold, the US had that spare Redstone rocket. The Redstone rocket had proven itself worthy many times, especially as a launch vehicle. Alan Shepard into space, America's first satellite. It was a win-win. The WRE wasted no time and they pitched their idea to the Sparta project. And amazingly, they were on board. You know what, Australia? You can have that Redstone rocket. We'll even launch this satellite for you for free. But we're out of here by the end of 67. That gives you 11 months. So you better get cracking. Woohoo! Happy day! Need some money. The Australian government, they're not really going to chip in for this. Space is, what other countries do. Money doesn't grow on trees, but they had the resources and the means, so nothing was going to get in their way. The WRE cancelled a lot of other projects and diverted funds to make way for this project. The Adelaide University likewise also diverted funds into this project. The Australian government eventually chipped in just to see it over the line. And as a bonus, NASA also offered their services for telemetry and tracking for free. All hands on deck, the design team sprang into action. This satellite had to succeed and had to be seen as something useful and must contribute to space vehicular development and advance our knowledge of Earth's upper atmosphere. The purpose, therefore, for WRESAT would be to take measurements of the various forms of radiation, such as UV and X-rays, that continually bombard the orbital plane where rockets are now flying in and out of. It would share our knowledge of satellite design with friendly nations and show the world that Australia was capable and could be a key player in the space race. The design and engineering of WRESAT had its challenges and limitations. The engineers decided to use the existing nose cone that came with the original rocket. The nose cone was not intended for use as a satellite. Standing at 1.56 meters tall and having a base diameter of 76 centimeters, it was certainly going to be a tight fit for all the sensors, transmitting equipment and power sources, with the added reality that its weight must be kept to a bare minimum. Having all things considered, its main limitation was the inability to attach solar panels. Solar panel capability would have given WRESAT a longer lifespan in orbit and probably reduced weight overall. Given the time they had, it became apparent that a battery cell would have to be used and battery power would only last 5 days. The WRESAT project had a very limited time and budget. There were no pre-existing facilities or apparatus to test a satellite of this design anywhere in Australia, as this was a first. The scientists and engineers came up with ingenious methods to test every aspect of the satellite before it was launched into orbit. One instance was they needed a special paint to insulate for the extreme temperature variations as the satellite went through the atmosphere. When the paint was delivered, it was discovered that it wasn't the correct paint at all. But our scientists came up with a solution. Instead of using this special space-age paint, they used normal household enamel grade. They put it through the tests, and it passed, so they used it on the actual satellite for the mission. As time went on, the scientists and engineers refined the satellite until it was ready for launch. That day was the 28th of November 1967, and the place was going to be Woomera's LA-8 launch complex. Everything was in place. The satellite was carried over to the launch pad in the back of a ute. The 45-kilogram satellite was placed on top of the launch vehicle and moved firmly into the upright position. With a fresh coat of olive oil drab paint and a kangaroo and a big WRESAT written on the fuselage, this shining new machine was resplendent to be seen. As we know, the launch on the 28th of November did not go according to plan due to technical difficulties. But it was fixed, and then...
By control van, missile functions were checked. When all was well, the countdown began. As the countdown proceeds, the heater-cooler drop tank is shed. Light up. Lift off.
The second attempt at launch went absolutely perfect. As the rocket rose through the atmosphere above Australia, everything went according to plan. Until WRESAT reached her highest altitude, she was able to completely jettison from the second stage and finally entering a low Earth orbit, going from South Pole to North Pole. The data collected from the WRESAT satellite seemed to reflect everything that they'd previously known using the sounding rockets over the many years. On the third day, a sounding rocket was launched from Woomera. The data from the sounding rocket was compared with the instruments working on WRESAT. Everything aligned perfectly. The satellite was working perfectly. But sadly, all things must come to an end. Given that the satellite wasn't powered with solar panels and relied on batteries, the 5 days of battery life had elapsed. WRESAT effectively became a dormant object. The orbit began to decay, until finally WRESAT's journey had come to an end. On the 10th of January 1968, after 42 days and 642 orbits of the Earth, WRESAT plunged into the Atlantic Ocean. Mission complete. WRESAT was officially Australia's entry into the space age, having been the third nation to build its own satellite and successfully launch it and operate it in low Earth orbit. The next big adventure for Australia was our participation in the Apollo program, where images of the moon landing were relayed around the world direct from Honeysuckle Creek and Parkes radio telescopes. WRESAT's mission was complete. Was it a success? Well, in a way it was, but in a way it wasn't. WRESAT was a cobbled together satellite of spare parts ultimately. The Australian government decided not to follow through or invest any more time in a space program. At the time, there were other more important things going on. Well, it didn't discover any new information that we didn't already know about the upper atmosphere. But the fact that we got it into orbit, survived as long as it did with the resources and the technologies that we had at the time. And not only that, it was a cooperation between nations to make use of something that otherwise would have been thrown in the scrap heap. Now that is an achievement, and the WRESAT project should be seen as inspiration by today's new generation of Australian scientists, engineers and space companies whose goal is the same as it was back in the 60s, to put our own satellites into orbit and hopefully contribute to the space age. And Australians showed that we could innovate and create, seize an opportunity, follow through with it and get the job done. The legacy of WRESAT is something that all Australians should be proud of. May WRESAT never be forgotten. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that video. I found it very fascinating, and I didn't even really know the extent of Australia's contribution to the space race. If you have any memories about WRESAT or any memories at all about Australia's contribution to the space race and the space age as a whole, then please leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. It's free, and hopefully I'll make some more videos that are of interest to you. In the meantime, this is Threads, this is ESAS. Have a good one.